Good evening. This is my by actually making connections between the poor, the poorer, and the poorest, as well as the rich and the richest. This broadcast essentially is saying that poverty can be measured in different ways. In Europe, the poverty in Europe is different, the poverty in America is different, but by and large, all of it is by the use of the GDP or per capita income of a nation, how much money people can make, the most money they can make, and the least money they can make for a period of time. So, Africa unfortunately, is one of the continents that has suffered tremendously in the hands of the Europeans and the West in terms of resources and inequality of resources. And when we use the five basic structures, which is the land, capital, entrepreneur, and also organizing resources, you're going to see that these are not properly factored into the lives of Africans. And it makes it very difficult for Africans to be able to compete in the rest of the world because their resources are very limited in terms of what they benefit out of their resources. A guy was making a contribution as what Nigerians do. Nigerians produce one of the biggest oil reserves in the world, and yet they are unable to refine their own oil. Their oil are exported to the United Kingdom, refined, and brought back to Nigeria to pay so much money, where it could actually be made possible for the resources to be actually exploited and refined as well. But we haven't figured out how to do this. And it's because of a technological know how which is not available to us because of limited resources. So you can see that the structure is such that we have been limited in terms of what we can do for ourselves. We always have to seek the help of the West. And so the West has taken advantage of this kind of thing, and they continue to see us as fools or stupid people. We continue to struggle our day to day lives, and we're the resource continent of the world. So I think that for us to have a good communication, we need to sit and have a meaningful communication as to why we have all resources, but we don't have the technical expertise, and we struggle to get the technical expertise. And as a result, we pay so much money for things that shouldn't cost us that much. Africans need to have a conversation and have a candid conversation. And all of these, it's geared toward making us somewhat an inferior human beings. Because why is it that we don't solve our problems? Why is it that everybody in the West tends to be the one to solve our problems for us? And the method, the strategy that they use in solving our methods put us into a poverty scheme. We continue to be poor. So there's a need for us to have a conversation with ourselves, and let's have honest critique or critics about what is happening to us. I just want to have just 1 day strike where African countries will not export any product to Europe. And let's see how Europe handles the situation. I think that we tend to think like we should always have access to aid. These aid will help us to live better. They don't. They don't. We can live without aid by large measure, but we're scared to try that route. Yes, we can live without aid. Aid is not doing well for us. We have been taking aid for 4 centuries, if not more, and our lives haven't improved. So, what makes us think that by continuing to have aid, which is in itself an exploitatory machine for our success, why are we continuing doing this? Any country that genuinely wants to help us could help us develop versus aid. Aid is not a component of development. No country has relied on aid, even including Europe or North America. And now they're developed. So they continue to treat us like children. We should depend on them. No, no one depends on anybody. No, there shouldn't be that dependent mentality that we have to depend on them, that they have to think for us, they have to do for us, they have to give us aid so that we can budget our own budget. No, we should create a budget where we can fulfill with limited resources. Another thing that Africa should do is that Africa should start saving domestically. Stop buying everything else the West is selling you. When the West sells you something, you should know that they're either a need or a want need. And Africa does not need to continue to buy things that they don't need. It's nice to have cars, it's nice to have other luxury items, but if it doesn't perform a service, then we're going to have diminishing returns because we're just getting things we don't need. I mean, let's be smart about how we live our lives. Let's start first with needs versus want. There's too many wants in the African politics, too many wants in the African budgets, too many wants in the African decision making process, and not much of domestic savings. So we should consider how we can save money versus how we can spend money. China's resources is not that great, but yet they do a lot of domestic savings, and Africa should do that. We should learn things from other brethren and other people in this world. For example, the Jewish. The Jewish knowledge based on money management. It's amazing. Let's learn money management. Let's teach each other money management. Let's teach each other how to do things as a group. And the individualistic way of doing things has not solved our problem. We should be a group. We should do things in a cluster of group. Grouping is one of the things we have not learned how to do. Let's improvise group thinking, group dynamics, group effect. We can't continue being individuals. It hasn't done much for us. If I'm filthy rich and I'm wealthy and I'm able to have all the resources at my doorstep and my neighbor can barely survive, it's common sense. We should know that that's not acceptable. No country will survive. No country will be prosperous if everybody's poor and a few people are rich. It doesn't make any sense. Our wealth needs to be distributed, and it needs to be distributed among the population. So, poverty in Africa is because we have allowed foreign structures to come into our system. Let's evaluate our structure and put in or inject into it things that will make people successful and things that will change people's life. Let's create a sense of changing the dynamics as was told to us by the British, the Commonwealth in the West. Let's create our own neighborly situations that will help us develop. White people use terms such as, oh, it takes a village to raise children. This is typical of a person like Hillary Clinton. Now, this is a good concept. If truly it takes a village to do this, why is the village in Africa not being united, do things together, try to be a village to solve its problems instead of always allowing some village from the West somewhere to solve our problems? We are our own village. If people can use our way of doing things and thinking to tell us that they can develop using the same strategy, then we should be able to do that. Let's not continue to think that what we know is wrong. Africa needs confidence. Africa needs to understand that we're better than everybody in the world because everybody in the world came from us. Why do we have to continue learning from other people in a way that doesn't help us? Because we want to be like everybody else. No, everybody should be like us. We are the original of everything. We were created before anybody else. So we have the DNA, we have the template to become the best we can. So, Africa, we need to sit down and have a conversation. If I take $1 million from Ghana, if I take $1 million from Nigeria, if I take $1 million from any other African country and make it my own, it still hasn't solved the problem. Let's solve the problem of poverty. Let's create inclusiveness. Let's create love and understanding to understand that when your brother is hurting, you're hurting too. So, Africa, this is our moment. It's showtime. Let's come up with a strategy that will prevent the enormous poverty on our continent. We have all the resources in the world, and we can use our resources to better the lives of our people. I hope that somebody can come up with a class which is called How to Manage Your Resources, so that every African child before you born, you understand that your continent is full of resources. But if you make the wrong decisions, your people will suffer. It is important for us to understand that. And we need to also come up with a strategy where we can create the best business practices possible, meaning honesty, on time, on time, on time. And when you make an agreement with somebody, you are obliged to the agreement. Time is significant. Being honest about what we do is significant to help us to progress to the next level. The European countries in Europe, in America, in the West do understand the concept of being truthful in business. We haven't been successful in trying to be truthful and honest in business. And that is a pervasive action that continues to haunt us in business dealings. We can't trust each other. There ought to be a level of trust across board if we should do well in international business and even with ourselves. So let's create a business language of nothing but truth and honesty. Exploiting somebody in business is not the way to succeed, but giving your best to the person, your word is your honor. Let's do this because Africa can do so much. Originally, my concept is about technology, but I need to be able to elaborate on poverty as a stumbling block to technology development. If you're poor, you're limited. So everybody will come up with their own ideas, their own structures, their own creation, and expect you to follow. No, we want to be a part of the solution by buying into the same concept that others have over us. Okay, it's like you're sick and somebody's prescribing medication for you, but they don't even know if the medication works for you or not because you're not involved in your treatment. Let's be involved in our treatment. Africa deserves nothing but the best. In Africa, we just saw what happened. The queen is dead. He has stolen resources from Africa and stored them. Well, why are you blaming the queen? Why are you blaming the queen? Because you have your resources. You got to think ahead of how to manage your resources. You can't just allow the queen, for whatever reason, to be able to do this, and then you start talking about or complaining. Okay, there was a time you were being dominated by the queen, but you're not today. Figure out what is right, what is fair. If it means that most of these resources should be returned, we will have to negotiate. We have a team of people, consortium, and we get these resources back to us. It is us, and we need to have it back, like Jamaica is doing. And every Commonwealth nation who feels the Queen has exploited them, there should be a what do you call it? A setup or a sort of a campaign to discuss discuss the subject, so that we will be able to retrieve our resources. So Africa can do better. But let's go back to where we were in terms of how we exploited and how we can get back what is rightly ours. And I'm very glad that we can have this conversation. I hope that people will understand this concept and will work in a way that will solve our problem. Africa, we can solve our problem. We don't need anyone to solve our problems for us. Stop making decisions for us, the West. Stop making decisions for us. If you genuinely want to help us, let's do this in a consortium form where we become the people who know what we want versus allowing you to make decisions for us and telling us what we need. You don't know what we need. No one but yourself knows what you need. Thank you. Have a great evening.